Welcome back to Melodic Minds, a podcast where we aim to explore the interdisciplinarity in the process of music creation. Our podcast is hosted by us, Lynn Falconer and Beth Mills, two researchers in the field of aquaculture and infectious disease.
For today's conversation, we're delighted to have Professor Colin Campbell with us. Colin is both a chemist and a musician. Colin is Chair of Medical and Biological Spectroscopy at the University of Edinburgh, where he served as the Head of Organic Chemistry between 2020 and 2025. After completing his PhD at Coventry University, Colin held postdoc positions at the University of Connecticut and Imperial College London, before taking a step into industry at Entera in Dublin, a startup working on protein diagnostics, before joining the University of Edinburgh, where he's remained since 2003, with one notable sabbatical at the University of Colorado, Boulder, between 2018 and 2019. Colin is world-leading in the field in the use of Raman spectroscopy to study biological systems, and particularly in the use of surface-enhanced Raman spectroscopy, also known as SERS, to study complex 3D models of disease. For example, to measure redox potential, pH, and hypoxia of cells and tissues in response to various therapies and injuries. More recently, Colin and his collaborative and multidisciplinary team have been using SERS to measure drug responses in cystic fibrosis patients compared to healthy volunteers. But Colin isn't all about the science. He's been playing guitars and bagpipes in bands since the early 90s and 2000s. He founded the Shortbread Tin Collective with Ken Donaldson. In 2018, he took that sabbatical with a Fulbright award to research science and music connections in Boulder, Colorado. Most latterly, Colin was awarded funding from Creative Scotland to make the West of Fjord album.
Colin, welcome. What an amazing career you've had, and I'm so intrigued to hear more about the science and the music that's influenced each other as we go through this conversation. But first of all, I'd actually just like to hear a wee bit more about your musical projects. So I wondered if you could give us some more details about the Short Tin Collective, the Fulbright project in Boulder, and the funding that you received from Creative Scotland to make your latest album.
Okay, well, taking those one at a time. The Shortbread Tin Collective is the band that I have with my really good friend Ken Donaldson. And Ken was Professor of Nanotoxicology at the University of Edinburgh up until about 2012, I think he retired. And he was a fantastic mentor. He really one of the best people I ever worked with scientifically, because he just wanted to help and didn't particularly want anything to further his career in return, which was refreshing. So when he retired, then we started playing music together, and we have a lot of things in common musically and a lot of differences as well. But he has a little recording studio at his house, so most weeks I'll go around there one night a week and we record new music. And the music that we make is really for an audience of two people, me and Ken. And that's all our aspiration has ever been with the Shortbread Tin Collective, to make stuff that we like and that we enjoy making, and maybe to try out some strange ideas, or to just push the boundaries a little bit of sometimes of what we're comfortable with. So that's the Shortbread Tin Collective. And out of the Shortbread Tin Collective grew this thing that happened with the Fulbright Award, because when I was writing the application for the Fulbright Award, I knew I wanted to go and do a sabbatical, and I really wanted to think about some new things like tissue engineering that I hadn't really been exposed to in a great detail before. But I thought, when I was writing the grant application, I thought, well, what would I be doing if I was really living the dream? Because the Fulbright want quite a broad application with more than just academic. I thought, well, I would also be doing something that involved science and music. So I wrote that into the grant application. And when I went to the interview and I gave them the little 3-minute pitch at the start of the interview, they looked at me and they said, well, one of these things is different from the other, isn't it? They don't hear about science and music very often. And maybe that was the thing that got me in the room. So I had this idea at that point that I would want to do music about science and maybe some music derived from scientific data. And when I started the sabbatical year, I realised I didn't really know how to do that. So I spent quite a good chunk of the first couple of months just figuring out, how do you turn data into something that's musical when it's really had no musical intent at its. So that's one of the challenging things about all of that stuff, which I think I've figured out some avenues into that. So that was a great experience, and that led to things like giving a talk at a music festival, which was, for us academic scientists, giving a talk at a music festival feels like another world. And some other things which just edge this profile of getting science into music just a little bit up. And then during lockdown, I did some things with some of my colleagues in chemistry because it was just nice to be able to do something together, and it was quite a good way of uniting people. There was one point during lockdown, I think it was maybe the first Christmas of lockdown or the second one, where we had booked to go to Skye for the Christmas holidays just to get the hell out of Dodge and just to experience some rain hitting a different window. And then on the 19th of December, or whatever it was announced there's a total travel ban. And so we were stuck. I just thought, well, I'm composing music, but this became the focus of it, that I was going to compose music about this particular bit of Skye where I used to go to for all my summer holidays because my grandparents lived there, my dad was born there, my whole family on that side comes from that little bit of Skye in Loch Bracadale. I thought, well, that's the focus for this bit of whatever I'm doing now. I'm just going to make in inverted commas, concept album about Loch Bracadale. And so I wrote a load of tunes about it. Then I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if I could actually record this, professionally, and maybe engage some other musicians in it. And that's another point where I said, well, what would I be doing if I was living the dream? I would be recording this like a professional musician. And I went to Creative Scotland. Well, actually, first of all, I spoke to my cousin about it, who has a recording studio up in Ardgour. And her and her husband were like, yeah, let's go to Creative Scotland, try and get some money for it. And I did, and first time unsuccessful, second time successful, and then we made the album, which has been a fantastic experience to live that other life as a musician.
That's brilliant. Can I ask a question, Colin? You said that the Shortbread Tin Collective was about making music for, the audience of two,
yeah,
you and Ken. So when you came to start thinking about the work you were doing in Boulder to make this music for other people, what sort of is the difference in that thought process there? Is there anything from the base?
I think there is a difference. There's a difference in making things accessible. And there's a whole range of music, from avant-garde music, where some of it you might find difficult to listen to, and really, really easy listening music. And I think what I learned in Boulder is that when you take data and turn it into music, you're not really turning it into music, you're just turning it into sound. And you have to start applying some constraints to it to make it into music. In fact, you have to even start applying some constraints to make it just not noise. So I think that was the journey of accessibility, where I started thinking, well, okay, I've got a protein sequence and I could just randomly assign notes to amino acids. But what do you get when you do that? Well, it sounds awful.
Did you try that?
Oh, yeah. That's probably the first thing I tried.
Yeah.
And then I realised, but that's not how people make music. People don't make music by just having a random collection of notes. People make music by having like a root note that everything returns to, right? That gives you some sort of sense of resolution. Having some other notes that give you a sense of tension that you use a little bit more sparingly. And you can make very listenable pieces of music with 4 notes, for example. Like if you want to make a piece of music from an RNA sequence, you can use 4 notes and make something that sounds quite nice. Because if you just take, for example, if you're in the key of C where you don't have any sharps or flats, which is the easy one to think about, if you use C, that's easy because that's the one that gives you resolution. Mm-hmm. If you use G, it also sounds nice because from a scientific perspective, it's 1.5 times the frequency of a C. So the waveforms overlap nicely and they're quite harmonic, but they're different. And so actually in the case of RNA, I thought, oh, well, I'm going to make the C a C. I'm going to make the G a G. Mm-hmm. I'm going to make the A an A, right? Because those are all in the pentatonic scale of C. So it's always going to sound nice and not overly dissonant. Yeah. And then I thought, well, the other one I'm going to just have to make, well, I'll make it a D. Mm-hmm. And there you go. Four notes from a bit of RNA, and I made a bit of music with a sequence of RNase P, which is an RNA enzyme, which is common across all forms of life. And actually, through that process of kind of working out, okay, so I'm going to give them notes that'll sound nice together. And then you've got notes, a string of notes, and they're all at the same volume. It just doesn't sound like someone playing music. Mm-hmm. But if you say, okay, well, I'm going to go strong, weak, medium, weak, mm-hmm. then you start tricking your brain into thinking that it's music, because that makes it more accessible just because there's some sort of contrast and repetition at the same time. And when you put chords behind that, then it gives it a structure where when there was no musical intent in the melody at all, you start to feel musical intent in the melody. So I learned quite a lot from doing that and trying to make those bits of music more accessible.
And so for that music, who has been listening to it? Where can you hear it?
You can hear that on the School of Chemistry at Edinburgh's YouTube channel, and it's all in a little playlist called Music About Science. So the RNA's P1, I did a little video for it as well, because I was on sabbatical and I just had the time to use them all to make a video using the structure of the molecule and try and make something that sounded nice. But just to finish the story of the RNA's P, though, because when I was making it, I realised that, you've got single-stranded RNA in this RNase, which is the way that we often think about nucleic acids from being taught at school. But when they form complex three-dimensional molecules, some parts of it are double-stranded because they're folding to make something like the pocket of an enzyme where a bit of chemistry is going to happen. So I thought, well, how do I represent the double-stranded bit? And I thought, well, if I was sitting on that strand of RNA and zooming along it, and all the notes were playing in time, when I got to the other bit, then those notes would be playing as well. But if I'm going from the 5' to the 3' direction, on that side they're going from the 3' to the 5' direction. So I recorded them in the 5' to 3' direction and then reversed them. So you hear that sort of reversed guitar kind of sound where you get just a different dimension to it. So when you listen to it, you can actually hear where the molecule is double-stranded and where it's single-stranded, and you can hear all of the different bases.
I was wondering, hearing you talk like that, the process of kind of taking that and making it musical, has that then fed back to your understanding of chemistry and your appreciation for kind of the structures in any way? By translating into music, has there also been a kind of feedback as to how you think about chemistry?
I'd love to say yes, but I think the answer is probably no. I gained a much greater appreciation of the structure of these molecules.
Yeah.
But I think it was really just because I had to work on them.
Yeah.
Like I had a dedicated project where I had to go and say, okay, now I have to sit down and look at the structure of this thing and figure out what's going on. It's kind of a holy grail of sonification of data, that you'll find a way of representing something scientific that'll aid your understanding of it. And I don't think it's crazy to think about, because we just have everything which is biased towards visual learning.
Absolutely.
In chemistry, we have a visual language which I think people forget is just a visual language that represents what chemicals look like. That's just a way of representing it. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a good way of representing things like that in a way that you can listen to rather than a way that you can look at. And I think that would also make chemistry more accessible to people who are not good visual learners, or maybe to people who don't have good vision.
I think that's a very good point, actually.
Yeah, I think super interesting.
Making things in a different way, and also then perhaps opening doors to how people can think about things in a slightly different way as well. I wondered if I could ask you what the term interdisciplinarity means to you.
To me, it means bringing things together which are very different and creating something which is more than the sum of the two things. I think those are the two essential criteria as far as I'm concerned. Interdisciplinary research, for example, that brings together inorganic and organic chemistry. And I think that's just chemistry.
Two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. It's got to be further apart than that to be really interdisciplinary.
Yeah. I think the way as well is also perhaps pushing the boundaries towards what we think in terms of a traditional research, and like what you've done with your Fulbright, really taking that time also to explore different avenues that can just make your thinking slightly in a different way. I think that's a nice example, the work that you've been doing as well.
Yeah.
Even if you're not directly bringing both together, it's also just about unlocking that thought process. So I think your work is very, very interesting from an interdisciplinary perspective.
Yeah, and you made me think about something there, which was, you were asking whether the sonification had an impact on the way that you think about science, and I said, well, not as much as I would hope it could. But what it did have an impact on was the way that I could think about composition. right?
Okay.
Composition of music. Because, this Westerfjord thing that I did, and Westerfjord was the Vikings' name for Loch Bracadale in Skye, because before the Battle of Largs in 1263, there was a big Viking occupation of the Western Isles. And after the Battle of Largs, where, as I understand, and I'm not a historian, the Vikings were beaten as much by the weather as they were by the Scots, they actually sheltered in Loch Bracadale, in that little bit of water where I used to go fishing every summer for mackerel. That was part of the inspiration for doing something that had a little bit of historical reach into the place. But then when I thought about, well, if you're going to do something about a place, how do you represent a place in music? And there are obvious ways of representing a place in music, like, for example, Loch Lomond, the famous song. If you just have Loch Lomond in the title, everybody knows that the song is about Loch Lomond. But I thought, well, is there a different way of representing the place? And I thought, well, I could collect data about the place and sonify it and turn that into part of the music, which is representing the place. And then there's a tune that actually has the altitude profile of a part of the path round the loch in the music.
How do you even go about sonifying altitude profiles?
So we did some field work up there. That was part of the funding from Creative Scotland. And I got on my bike in Struan, which is one part it's a sea loch, right? So you can't go all the way around it. I got on my bike at Struan. I rode all the way around to the beach at Varkesig. Actually, I rode my bike up the forestry path as well, up to this point called Rebels Wood. Don't let me forget to come back to that. Rebels Wood. And then I carried on running out to MacLeod's Maidens, which is like, that's the sort of the edge of the sea loch where beyond that it's just the Minch, right? And I collected all my heart rate data and all the altitude data on my watch, so that when I got back I could just download that from my watch and convert those files into sound and then figure out how to make them into music.
That's amazing. And it's also like history to modern technology.
Yeah.
You've got all of that all in one kind of thought process.
Yeah.
Very interested to hear about Rebels Wood though.
Rebels Wood is a little patch of planted native woodland on the path between the beach at Varkesig and out to the MacLeod's Maidens, which are amazing. If you ever get the chance to go out and see these natural sea stacks out there, Rebels Wood, and I was surprised to find it in 2008 or something when I was going for a wander. And there's this plaque saying, planted in the memory of Joe Strummer of The Clash, right?
Really? Oh, wow.
And I thought, hang on a second, I can see my granny's house from here. How can these worlds be colliding?
Yeah.
The Clash and, my sort of family heartland where I only really think about traditional music. So that was like, a collision of worlds where when I started making the album, I thought there must be something in that collision that I could do something interesting with. And so I composed a bit of music where it's quite a guitar-y sounding kind of thing. And I got my colleague, who's a respiratory physician and lung researcher over in Glasgow, Robert Gray, who's a fantastic bagpiper, to record a pibroch that we called Rebels Wood that goes along with this raucous bit of guitar playing and incorporates my heart rate data at the beginning. You wouldn't listen to that and think, oh, that's someone's heart rate. It's not. It's not that, right? It's the numbers of my heart rate turned into something musical. And then in the middle, it's got the altitude data of where I climbed up to Rebels Wood and then ran down to the Maidens.
It's absolutely incredible. It also shows us how music can be more than what you think in terms of that data into a melody or something.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's quite a skill that's very different to any that I have, to sort of see all these different elements and actually bring them into music and convert stuff musically. I wouldn't have a clue. I'm intrigued to know, how do you think this music translates to people that don't know all of this backstory, don't know where the elements have come from? Does it hold up as its own thing, or is it part of a journey for people to learn about the backstory and it accompanies it?
When I was making it, I made it with the intention that you didn't have to know there was data in it to enjoy it. It had to sound good. And I think it sounds great. I love the album. It was Album of the Week on Radio and Gale last week, so it got a bit of radio play, which was good.
Well
Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I haven't spoken to anyone who didn't like it. But then you wouldn't necessarily tell me if you didn't like it.
I'm sure there'd be a few people.
I have another question. As a chemist and as a researcher, often you're measured by outputs in terms of papers and conference publications and things like that, whereas the work that you're doing with music and producing your album is a very different type of output, and it's a very different, like we've just been discussing in terms of reception, how people see it. How do you see the two experiences between your recognition with your outputs from chemistry and your recognition as outputs from music, and balancing the contrast, and also if there's some similarities there?
Well, I think in science, in academic science, it's pretty clear what you're measured on. And as far as music goes, I'm lucky in that there's no pressure on me to be measured at all. I've not got no boss looking over my shoulder saying, why haven't your sales been higher this week, or why haven't your plays been higher this week? So the parallel between the two is not really there in that regard. You know, like there's no pressure from someone else to have metrics of how well the music is doing. But I still want the music to be successful.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
So still care whether it's getting radio play. Last week I put into ChatGPT, give me the contacts for all radio stations in North America that play traditional or Scottish music. And I sent them all the link to the album, right? Because
nice,
I care about whether it gets out there.
And you want it to have an audience.
I want it to have an audience, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing. It's like that. How do you reach your audience with your different kind of... So with chemistry, your audience is through kind of papers and publications, conferences, whereas this is through people actually being able to listen to the album and appreciate it.
Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying earlier for this latest album, you said that you worked with other musicians and they came in to do the recording.
Yeah.
I guess, how does that process work? Were they musicians that you already knew? Did they come in and play prescriptively what you'd come up with? Did you have to work together on any elements to refine them, bring aspects in that maybe you hadn't considered?
Well, a couple of them were people that I knew already. Like Robert, who played the bagpipes and the whistle on the album. I already knew Robert. We'd played together before. I knew how good he is. I hope you're listening to this, Robert, because I knew that he wouldn't be prepared, but that he'd be great on the day. So I could live with that ambiguity.
A bit of magic that can be added in through that.
But the other people like Ewan Henderson, who played the fiddle, and Neil Sutcliffe, who played the accordion, and James McIntosh, who played the drums, they are exceptional musicians. And I sort of didn't really feel the need to worry about them. And there were some parts of accordion that I'd recorded on a keyboard that I wanted to be quite true to it. But then there were other parts where I just wanted to be able to say, just do your thing, right? You don't need me telling you what to do.
Yep.
And those bits were magic, right?
Yeah.
And the stuff that Ewan did on a couple of the tracks, and I was in the studio for it, I just felt like, you know, Rick Rubin, the producer, he's got a great book about creativity. But what he says about it is, you know, I don't really try and tell people what to play. I just wanted a particular feeling or sound from it. And I just lie on the couch and listen to it, and if it sounds good, then great. And so that's when Ewan was playing, I just lied on the couch and that was it.
Sounds like a great day in the office.
Yeah.
I think this comes back to something that we've discussed before about one of the best bits about interdisciplinary working is that you have the trust in experts in their own domains. And actually when you give people that space and respect and know that everyone is trusted and is championed, then that's actually sometimes where the unexpected and beautiful things. Yeah. It sounds like that's quite similar in some of your processes that you've done here.
And trying to micromanage those things is a disaster. It's not my intuition to try and micromanage things anyway, but I know from experience that that is just the wrong approach.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's maybe something that we see happening in our STEM disciplines and when we're trying to come up with projects together, that actually we can learn a lot more from this sort of creative space and these trust areas, and just know that the product will be there. And
you got to let the magic happen. You can't just be in charge of everything. Yeah,
otherwise what's the point? And leads to frustration and disenfranchisement.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's brilliant. I was wondering though, through this process, did you ever, through any of your sort of musical interdisciplinary process, have you ever had any challenges or barriers or disagreements, and how did you kind of approach them, resolve them?
Very few. When I think about the stuff that I do with Ken and the Shortbread Tin Collective, we very rarely disagree at all. And even if we have differences of opinion, we rarely disagree about what to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll play something and he'll say, well, that should be an E minor, not an E major. I'm like, well, I like an E major there. and that's just, you know, if we're going to break rules, we'll break rules.
Mm-hmm.
And he's as happy with that as I am with him, because really in music there's not really any rules. It's just about what works and what doesn't work.
Would you say that partly some of this comes from the fact that you work with people that you know well and you know who they are as a personality and a person, and that kind of is the core or an underlying factor, as well as the expertise that they bring, but also that a personable, amenable person to work with?
That's for sure. That is the thing about working with Ken and Robert, that I knew how they work, and I knew not really to be afraid of how they work, if you know what I mean. It was a bit of a step into the unknown, working with Neil and James McIntosh and Colin Steele, I forgot as well, who played an amazing trumpet solo on one of the tunes that was just... I was on the bus going up to the recording studio because it was the last day. It was like, we've got to get everything done. And he was in a studio in Glasgow, and there was emails going backwards and forwards, and he said, well, I'm going to play blah, 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 blah on the first bit, and then on the second bit, I'm just going to give it Laldi. I was like, right, good on you.
Go for it.
Go for it, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask, where does the name Shortbread Tin Collective come from?
Where did that come from? It just came from, we were trying to brainstorm what would be a name that would sum up what we were doing, and we thought, well, we want it to be as inclusive as possible, that people can drop in and drop out, and Robert drops in, drops out. Peter Nardini we did stuff with, he dropped in, dropped out. There's a few people who pop up now and again, and that's great. We want to be able to leave that open, and the shortbread tin part was just, well, what's something which is corny and Scottish?
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Can't beat some good shortbread.
I was also thinking that I definitely have got a whole load of metal shortbread tins that are now full of all sorts of other things as well. That, you know, storage, things go in, things go out. No two are the same, and maybe I was reading too much into it, but that's what it made me think of.
I also think that description, just what you've said there just now about it being quite fluid and people coming in and out, can also apply to research as well. You can have benefits when you have solid partnerships that are quite core and can keep going, but also bringing other people in at different times as well from an interdisciplinary perspective. Wonder if you have any thoughts on that as well.
Oh yeah, I definitely think that you need to bring, you know, new ideas in and bring expertise in as well. When you're doing Raman spectroscopy, you get spectra that tell you about the chemistry of your sample, but sometimes they have horrible baselines that make it really difficult to see the peaks that you're interested in. And that's okay if you've just got one spectrum and you can say, oh, well, I'll just take that baseline out of it. But if you've got 10,000 spectra because you've taken an image, then you can't do it by hand anymore. So Prasad came up with this idea that you ought to use a different way of baseline correcting spectra so that you didn't have to do it by hand, but you also didn't have to just have one set of parameters, because spectra are different. Some have big baselines, some small baselines. So he came up with this idea to use machine learning and a smart bit of maths to do it all. And I said to him, look, this is outside my area of expertise, right? Mm-hmm. What we'll do is we'll get somebody in who understands the informatics part of it to make sure that we're not doing anything crazy. I can have oversight of all the Raman stuff that's in it. But, you know, sometimes you just have to accept that you're not an expert on things and ask someone else for help. And that's a great thing about being at a university where you can just reach out to people and say, I need an hour of your time if you don't mind.
I think especially with the sort of interdisciplinary aspect, you've got to get comfortable with not knowing everything.
Oh, yeah.
Which can be a challenge at first, but then I think you have to embrace that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and go on the hunt for people,
Absolutely.
either through your networks and actually saying out loud to people, I need help in this. Can anyone help? Because I think sometimes, you know, we play our cards close to our chest and you don't want to admit necessarily always the things that you don't know. But I think when it's a discipline and something so far away from what you would ever reasonably be expected to know, it can make it a bit easier. And actually you start there and then it makes it easier to ask for help at things that do come closer and closer and closer. And I think that definitely has some of the best relationships and trajectories have gone for some of my things and presumably for yours as well.
Yeah.
Does your band play live as well as recording, or is it mainly recording focused?
The Shortbread Tin Collective never plays live.
Okay.
So the band for Fjord is called Colin Campbell and the Bracadale Collective. If we have the opportunity, I think I would quite like to play that album live, because I can see some smart things that we could do with it in terms of using the sounds, the recorded sounds. You know, I said about recording my heart rate and all that stuff, but we also did hydrophonic recordings of the Loch so that you can hear what it sounds like in Loch Bracadale, and used that in one of the recordings. Well, you're an aquaculture person, aren't you? So you know what under the water sounds like.
Fascinating.
Sounds
so
like
different.
pistol shrimps cracking off all the time.
That's very cool.
So if we did a live experience, I think we could use some of that stuff and maybe a little bit of smart chemistry to extract some of the odours of the environment.
4D experience. You have the sound, you have the music, you could even have visualisation.
Oh, we've got the video as well.
Perfect.
Smell of bog myrtle, smell of seaweed, recreate the West Highlands in the Albert Hall.
I think this is your next funding application. I think that would be excellent. I think we'll be front row if we can. If you ever manage this, we will be front row.
Yeah, maybe out of the splash zone.
Yeah, maybe that's true.
So, Colin, as we're drawing this to a close, what advice would you give to someone trying to integrate interdisciplinarity practices into their creative work, whether it's music or another field?
I think you have to be willing to go out of your comfort zone and admit that you're not an expert on things, and embrace that, and then find people to work with. And find people who you enjoy working with and who have a similar mindset to you in terms of interdisciplinariness, and sharing the creative process, sharing the credit for it, sharing the frustrations of it. That's an important part of it. You want to have partners that engage in all of that stuff with you. And I think just don't be constrained by where you think the boundaries are or where people tell you the boundaries are, because most of the time they don't exist. You know, that E minor could be an E major for all you care.
Yeah, and it can make all the difference.
Yeah, it could make all the difference.
Yeah.
What's a song that's got an E major when it should be an E minor? It is Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you look at I think it's in C major, but if you look at the chords that he plays, he actually plays an E major, which should be an E minor in that key. But it does make all the difference.
Yeah, amazing. I think that's a great line to finish on there. Do you have any thing else that you want to tell us about that you're doing, or you want people to go and take a look at?
No, I want everyone to go and listen to my album, Fjord. It's on Amazon, it's on Spotify, it's on Bandcamp. You can find it anywhere. It's on YouTube. Give it a spin.
Please do. Everybody, I think, should listen to it. And I think hearing the story from how you've explained it, I hope that also, when people are listening to it, they realise the work that's gone into it behind it. So just to finish up, is there a piece of music that inspires or resonates with you from an interdisciplinary standpoint? And, well, what is it and why?
Oh, there's a lot of answers I could give you. Bjork did an album called Bastards, which has got a track on it called Virus. It's got a track on it called Crystalline. And it's a great album in that it has some of those scientific elements associated with it. But I think the one that I always go back to that makes me think, I can't believe you managed to get those scientific words in there, is called The Greatest Story Ever Told by Aidan Moffat and Bill Wells. It's on a great album that came out around about 2012. And it's got the words like Borula, Blastocyst in there.
Wow.
A fantastic song. And it's a beautiful thing, and it's Scottish as well. So once you're finished listening to Fjord, give that a wee spin as well.
Yep, add it to the playlist.
Yeah, that'll go on.
That's great. Thanks so much for coming to speak to us today, Colin.
Thank you for having me.
Enjoyed hearing all about you, your work, and I've definitely learned a few new things and definitely plenty of new music to go and listen to.
It's been fascinating. I think we could talk all day, so I really appreciate the time that you've taken to spend with us today as well. It's been really good.
This has been Melodic Minds. Thank you so much for joining us today. This podcast is executive produced by Lynn Falconer and Beth Mills, and our producer is Perla Gomez, with sound engineering and mixing also by Perla Gomez. We are supported by the UKRI Future Leaders Development Network. Special thanks to our guests, listeners, and everyone who makes this possible. If you enjoyed the episode, please rate, review, and subscribe from wherever you get your podcasts. We'd really love to hear your thoughts. Drop us a message at melodicminds@gmail.com or find us on socials @melodicminds.